We begin tonight with just 4 weeks to go until Election Day. A number of states have already begun early voting, and as the candidates make their final sprint to the finish line, now is the critical time for each to get in front of as many different voters as possible to make their case. Today, Vice President Kamala Harris continued her media blitz in an effort to reach a wide variety of audiences on different platforms. This morning, she joined the ladies of The View, where she rolled out a new policy about expanding Medicare to cover the cost of long-term care at home.
To your point about being in the sandwich generation, there are so many people in our country who are right in the middle. They're taking care of their kids and they're taking care of their aging parents. And it's just almost impossible to do it all, especially if they work. We're finding that so many are then having to leave their job, which means losing a source of income, not to mention the emotional stress. And so what I am proposing is that basically what we will do is allow Medicare to cover in-home health care.
She then went on the Howard Stern show on Sirius XM, discussing an array of topics, including what she thinks this election is all about.
I do believe that this is an election that is about strength versus weakness.
Yeah.
And weakness as projected by someone who puts himself in front of the American people and does not have the strength to stand in defense of their needs, their dreams, their desires, the work that must happen to make sure that we are a secure nation, that we are nurturing and protecting our alliances around the world, that we are supporting America's military, that we are fighting to bring the cost of living down for working families, that we are building businesses, building growth.
She will also appear on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert tonight. This comes after Harris already appeared on the podcast Call Her Daddy, one of the most popular podcasts in the country, especially among women. And after appearing last night on 60 Minutes, an interview that all major party candidates for president have done for more than half a century. That is, until Donald Trump canceled last week. Among the various reasons why, according to Trump's campaign, is that 60 Minutes, a news program, would have the audacity to fact-check the interview. Here's the reality. Trump couldn't do the interview because at this point, he requires the safety of his MAGA security blanket. Yes, Trump may have done a number of interviews, but they are almost always with conservative outlets and Trump supporters. Most recently with Fox's Laura Ingraham last night and right-wing podcaster Ben Shapiro today. All Trump is doing is speaking to his base and his diehard supporters as he faces softball questions with little to no pushback or no follow-up at all, allowing him to just regurgitate alternative facts and misinformation with each breath. The two campaign strategies couldn't be more different. One is trying to reach out to diverse audiences while continuing to roll out substantial new policies. The other is remaining in his echo chamber, repeating the same debunked lies in an effort to inflame voters with his deceit. Joining me now is Fernand Demandi, Democratic pollster and MSNBC political analyst, Molly Jong-Fast, Vanity Fair special correspondent and an MSNBC contributor, and Tara Setmayer, co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project and a former GOP comms director. My thanks to this fantastic panel. I want to start, Molly, with you. We're going to play Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes, his explanation of why Trump pulled out of that 60 Minutes interview. Take a quick listen.
The campaign offered shifting explanations. First, it complained that we would fact-check the interview. We fact-check every story. Later, Trump said he needed an apology for his interview in 2020. Trump claims correspondent Leslie Stahl said in that interview that Hunter Biden's controversial laptop came from Russia. She never said that. Trump has said his opponent doesn't do interviews because she can't handle them. He had previously declined another debate with Harris, so tonight may have been the largest audience for the candidates between now and Election Day.
I mean, Molly, that was a doozy, number one. But let's be clear. If Kamala Harris were to pull out of that 60 Minutes interview, the media would lose their minds. Many in legacy media have been super critical of Harris for not doing a lot of interviews, so they say, when in fact, the truth is Donald Trump is the one who continues to refuse to sit down with anyone who's not a friendly face. Sounds like yet another double standard.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump is always compared to always given a pass compared to a normal candidate, right? He always gets away with stuff that a normal candidate would not necessarily. But I think what's important here about Harris and her strategy, which I think is very smart, she's going to where voters are. She's going to where the voters she needs are. So, for example, Howard Stern has a lot of white, non-college educated men. That's a demographic that she's going to. And Call Her Daddy was actually a really brilliant strategy because those are women of childbearing, reproductive age largely, though older women listen to it too. And they need to know about the Project 2025 and the plans that this Republican president would enact if he were elected.
You know, Fernand, Trump refuses to do the 60 Minutes interview, complaining he's going to be fact-checked. He complained about being fact-checked at the debate. Looks like he's never going to do another debate at this point. Is it because he's just a pathological liar and can't tell the truth? Or is he just too scared to be able to be in a format or a platform where he's never going to be able to just run his mouth with impunity?
Well,
or both.
I mean, he was a pathological liar in 2016 and 2020 and has been ever since. So I'm not so sure it's that. As much, Katie, I think it is. Trump showed in that debate that there was a way to get to him, right? Which is to make these crazy kind of appeals to ego that he quickly jumps on. He also understands that if he's in any kind of what you might call a legitimate media journalistic environment where he's going to be called on the carpet for a statement he made in the past, he falls apart. And I think this is as much a campaign decision, Katie, by the Trump campaign, as it is a Trump decision.
Do you think he's listening to people on the Trump campaign telling him not to do this?
Oh, I absolutely do, because I think Trump even himself recognizes the more people see him, the more people hear him, the worse he's going to do in this campaign. So they're just trying to hide him now and see what they could do to get him across the finish line, because that debate was revelatory. It's why Kamala Harris is desperate to have additional debates and why Trump has backed out of every opportunity to go one-on-one again with Kamala Harris.
It's like his campaign is like Weekend at Bernie's getting him across that finish line in November. So, Tara, here, look, it's not just interviews. Axios did a study of how many rallies Trump has held this campaign cycle compared to 2016. And you can see it up on the screen right now. So this was back in September, and it's substantially less. Even in the friendliest environments, when he has a teleprompter, a crowd of fans, and no interruptions, Trump still doesn't perform on the level he once did. And I want to emphasize the verb perform, Tara. So are his advisors, kind of to Fernand's point, telling him to limit his exposure? Or, in my opinion, I don't think the guy can do it anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. It's clear that Donald Trump is not the same guy that he was in 2016 or even 20. He's deteriorated considerably. Even his bronzer isn't as good. So he's struggling here, and we all see it happening in the way he talks, in the way he misspeaks. He's rambling more, slurring his words more. Trump is not well, and his advisors see that. And the more that he's out there, the more people see it, and he just physically cannot do it. He tries to blame everybody else. He blamed the Secret Service. He's blaming the venues, he's blaming Democrats, he's blaming the weather, whatever, instead of the fact that he can't handle it anymore. And he is the oldest person now in this race. He does not have Joe Biden as a crutch to blame for being the one that is too old and unable to and unfit to do the job. That's why he's obsessed with constantly bringing up Joe Biden and constantly projecting about, how come they just switched him out? And yeah, because now you're the old guy and everybody can see it. It's more pronounced. And the other thing, too, about this is I don't know necessarily that he's listening to his advisors, that he understands and recognizes that he can't do it. I think that they know how to stroke his ego enough, because he will never admit that he's not good enough. He'll never admit that he's failing. He'll triple and double down and say that he's the best he's ever been. He's better looking. That's why he compared himself to Kamala Harris. Remember that he's better looking than her, or whatever nonsense he was saying. He'll never admit that. Instead, they're putting him in areas where he is adored. We know that the adulation is his fuel. So they're limiting the rallies by manipulating it in a way that makes it seem as though he's in friendly territory, so he's still around people who adore him. Because I don't see how this strategy is adding voters. The more he's out there, the more people are repelled by him. And his advisors are smart enough to know that. But the other people who are the bootlickers that are just there to make him feel good about himself, they're figuring out a way to shield him so that he doesn't have to look in the mirror, literally, and see how terrible everything looks for him. And that is something that I think there's a double standard here, because we're actually talking about Kamala Harris maybe making a couple missteps during her View interview today, or she's on a media blitz because she has to have more policy. But Donald Trump has said a series of insane things over the last 5 days, including talking about bad genes for migrants and lying about hurricane disaster relief that could cost lives. But we're not talking about that. We're nitpicking Kamala Harris's policy positions. I think that has a factor also, that plays a role in this also. It's a double standard.